to do. And the shadow, as I understand it, and as I use that concept, is really the sum total of all the parts of yourself that you've had to cut away or avoid or hide in order to belong. And roughly as we go about constructing who we are and defining who we are from the ages of 2 to 22, building our personality, we do it in such a way where we try and look good and be right and be acceptable to others, which means there's parts of us that we have to cut away and avoid and neglect, or else they'll find out that we're not so much like them, that we're different, that oh man, all kinds of problems. And so we hide them and we tuck them away in the basement. And that's where they get really overgrown and kind of gangly, like a prisoner you shove down in a dungeon and his hair grows out and he starts to kind of look like me, a little bearded and wild and woolly. And then every once in a while he breaks out of the basement and you're like, oh my God, who is that marauder breaking into my nice house? Let's put him back. That's the shadow. The shadow are the parts of ourselves that we do our damnedest to make sure it never gets out into the open. Because if it did, they'd find out and we might not be accepted.
Yes, and I think one of the trickiest pieces about knowing our shadow is that oftentimes we're not aware of the shadow. We're not aware of the shadow until we're aware of the shadow. It's oftentimes these pieces of us that we take for granted, like, I have a really hot temper. That's just who I am. That's just how I am. And that's just a piece of me that I take for granted until I start doing this work and uncovering these pieces of me. And then it's like, whoa, that anger is actually not an inherent part of who I am. It's a part of my shadow. And now I get to relate to it in a different way, and with a different level of compassion. And it gets to be integrated into my whole in a way that's much more loving and conscious.
That's right. Well, actually, my favorite metaphor for this, which runs along with the idea of the basement of our shadows, is as a kid, I was terrified to go into our family basement. It was cold and it was musty and there were weird things there and they looked monstrous to me. You know, like the washing machine wasn't the washing machine. It was like a fire-breathing dragon in my eyes. And every time I would tiptoe down the stairs as a little boy, you know, it's like I would look in the corner and there was something waiting to gobble me up. But when you turn the lights on or when you grow into adulthood, what you realize is that thing over there, that's not a monster. That's like Aunt Gladys's weird doll collection. And then you have, you know, a choice. You get to dust those dolls off and bring them upstairs to the main level and integrate them into your life. Or you get to sell them at the rummage sale. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like the shadow. Once we turn on the lights, we can figure out, what do we want to bring into our life? Well, what do we want to skillfully sell off and kind of, you know, grow out of?
Yes. Yes. And the other way that I see it too is I often think of the shadow as like an iceberg. So, you know, the part of the iceberg that's above the water is the part of us that we share with the world, that we're really, really open about letting people see. And then everything below the surface is our shadow. And as we know about icebergs, there's often way more happening underneath the water than there is above the water. And the way that I look at it is, if I'm rejecting, let's say 80% of who I am, this part of me that lives below the surface, how am I supposed to have a full, integrated life with all of me showing up? Because often the greatest gifts of ours lie in the shadows. And so by denying our shadow side, we're also denying 80% of our life force energy and of potential to excavate gifts and to relate to others on a deeper, more intimate level, because we all have really similar shadows.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
Well, and
So,
what you pointed to is how that kind of shows up in our life so often, right? Like it's very unconscious. We're so mind blinded to the stuff that we keep under that iceberg tip that you talked about. The funny ways it shows up so often are things like dreams. You know, dreams are this most spontaneous expression of our unconscious. So, you know, I had a dream about a tiger chasing me a couple of weeks ago, and it chased me into my childhood home and all kinds of crazy, interesting things. Well, what's that dream saying? It really does mean something. And so, what I think is so helpful to understand about the shadow is that it's always trying to find a way out, to creep into our waking consciousness somehow. And so, whether it's dreams or sometimes like it'll even stumble out of our mouth. Jessica, have you ever had one of those moments where like you say something, but oh my God, did I just say that? Like, did that come out of me? I feel it, but I was not going to tell anybody that.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's another big way.
Yeah. And so just here in this moment, I would encourage everybody to just take a deep breath and notice what's coming up for you around this idea of shadow. Is there a part of you that comes to mind immediately when you consider examining your own shadow? Or is there not much that comes up at all? It's just an interesting inquiry. And so just get curious here in this moment about what aspects of your shadow are already maybe known to you. And I bet you that a lot of us have very similar ones.
Speaking of that idea of all of us kind of having these similar ways they come out, the two ways that most people seem to report is in the areas of projection and the areas of feedback. So to just define these and then kind of go into it, projection is really that thing that most pisseth me off in someone else. Right. It's like, boy, saw this in the newspaper today. How dare he? I cannot believe that. Or with your partner, you know, could you believe that she did something like this, or he did that, or they did, right? Like, oh my God, it just drives us crazy. Or that friend, how dare they show up late all the time? Whatever it is, something that draws this immense emotional reaction that might even be discongruent to the actual event itself. That projection, what that most often is a feedback loop about our own shadow, because we're so avoidant of that thing in ourselves that we have to push it away. And so when it comes in view, like in the form of someone else, we're like, get away from me. I can't hold that or have that. Is that kind of your experience too, Jessica?
Oh my gosh, 100%. And because I work primarily with women, the way that I'll often describe this in groups is that our sisters are our mirrors. That when we look at our sisters, or we look at the feminine collective, and there are things that we just cannot tolerate in another woman or in the female collective, that is a sure sign that there is a part of ourselves that we have othered and shadowed and rejected. And in the same vein, when we notice jealousy coming up inside of us, that is a sure sign that we are being shown a deep desire of ours that we have rejected and pushed into the shadows. So relationally, we can get a lot of information about our own shadows and our own work that we have to do just by being in intimacy with one another. It's kind of part of what we sign up for when we enter into any kind of intimacy.
And this, of course, brings up the other uncomfortable aspect of relationships, which is the feedback they give us about ourselves. So, you know, we get lots of kinds of feedback. Bosses give us feedback, coworkers give us feedback, partners give us feedback. My goodness, you know, we don't like feedback all that much. I don't like feedback, at least negative feedback. Give me all the positive feedback you want. That's great. But the minute you start, you know, shaking that finger at me and noticing things about me that are patternistic, especially, or that kind of, there's a through line here, oh my goodness, I want to make sure that I invalidate that. That's not true. That's not me. How could you say that? Yeah. But if we begin to take a shadow worker approach to this, we begin to listen, to lean our ear down to the ground and say, what are they saying about me? What's valid here? What can I begin to notice about myself? And that's hard. That's really hard work.
That's not only hard work, but that is the outlook of someone who has begun the process of accepting their shadow.
That's it. Yeah.
Perfect vulnerability protects perfectly. When everything is out in the open and we have integrated all parts of ourselves and we've rubbed on our shadow, there's not very much that can be triggered inside of us. So what I'm hearing in this, you know, this conversation right here is that if we truly desire to be in deep connection with one another, and we're human beings, so truly I believe that that's at the core of all of our motivations, right? We all want to be in deep connection, whether that be with family, friends, a partner. And what I'm really getting clear on here in this moment is that if we truly want to have the relationships that we desire and relate in a way that is fulfilling and sustaining, we need to be over here on the other side doing our own shadow work and accepting and integrating pieces inside of us that are challenging so that we can show up in full love.
Yeah. Yeah, because the opposite of showing up in full love is repeating these patterns, is getting stuck in these same old loops, the same old discomfort. It's that blame and shame game, right? Where he said, she said, they said that, and then I had to do this. And then, of course, it just blew up like that over and over to where in the end, we're simply being pushed around by life, where we have no agency. Carl Jung said that until we become conscious of the unconscious, we'll simply assume it's fate, right? And so if we become aware, if we expand the lens and begin to see it for what it is, suddenly we can begin to actually have some mastery in our life. And so in relationship to like the masculine and feminine, which I'm going to ask Jessica in just a second, what maybe she means when she says these terms. But in relationship to that, boy, we gain so much power when we start talking about the shadows here, the unconscious part of self, and especially in relationship. So Jessica, I'm just going to like lob this ball to you. Like, talk to me about the masculine and the feminine in your experience, and like, what do we mean when we say these big terms?
Absolutely. So firstly, I want to say that this the shadows and how they come up and how they affect our relationships happens on an interpersonal level. And what Rainier and I are kind of also very interested in exploring is how they happen on a societal and cultural level, because there are definitely archetypes that are pervasive in our culture, and there is relational shadow that happens not only on an interpersonal level, but on a big cultural societal level. And so these terms, masculine and feminine, used to really super trigger me because I was still living in kind of this brainwashed state where I believed the feminine to be like that term to almost be a diss, like to mean that I was less than, to mean that I was submissive, to mean that I was, I had no ambition, I wasn't worthy of like claiming my space in the world, I was an object. Like all of those shadow concepts that come up in our society around the feminine. And it wasn't until I started really doing my work to kind of heal some of my own internalized misogyny that I started to recognize the masculine and the feminine as just these beautiful, energetic concepts. And especially as we move into a world where we're recognizing gender fluidity and we're really starting to see how gender has been constructed, I think it's really important to become clear that when we say masculine and feminine, we're referring to energetic archetypes. So for me, I know that I'm in my feminine when I am receptive, when I am fully in my power of magnetism. So the feminine, she doesn't go out and hunt and chase. She simply sits in her own vibration and allows things to come to her. I know I'm in my feminine when I'm totally abundant and soft. Those are my cues, and there's much more I could say, but that's kind of the general outline for me of how I know that I'm in my feminine. And actually, when I'm in my feminine, I feel quite strong, because that was a big misconception of mine, that being in my feminine meant that I wasn't strong. But no, the more that I work with the feminine, the more that I see that quiet, receptive power. Oh my goodness gracious, that's strong. That is a strong force to be reckoned with. Then on the other side, when I'm in my masculine energy, I'm much more linear. I'm going out. My energy is outward, right? The feminine, if the energy is coming inward and it's receptive, the masculine, the energy is going outward into the world. There's much more of a logical way of looking at the world. The masculine is the container, it's the holding, it's the structure, so that the feminine gets to do her wild dance within the protective structure of the masculine. And that is why it's so important that we have all of these pieces integrated, not only internally within ourselves, because we all have masculine and feminine archetypes inside, no matter what our gender identity is, but it's also really important that we allow ourselves to relate to humans outside of us in our masculine and our feminine energy, so that we can all fully express in the ways that happen when we're safe to be in our feminine or safe to be in our masculine. I'm getting really pumped up. Rainier, I'm curious how that lands and what you might have to add to any of that.
Well, I was just thinking, when I'm in my feminine, you said this openness, this abundance. I experience that as like openness to all that there is. When I am squarely in my feminine, or softly in my feminine, there is this almost noticing of all that there is around me, where I mean, it's like standing in a forest and I'm not watching the forest, I am the forest. It's almost as though every single thing is connecting to me and I'm connecting to it. Whereas when I'm in my masculine, there is a sense of real focus. Like I'm able to isolate the sound. Again, using that forest analogy, I hear the cricket and all of my attention goes in that singular direction. And so it's that breath in, breath out quality, I think, sometimes, where it's as though the masculine is the breathing out and the feminine is the breathing in. And they really work in this beautiful symmetry together. Like we need that receptive and that outgoing or active quality. And we name them masculine and feminine, but boy, they've gone by so many names before. And these are the names we're giving them, but these principles are pretty archetypal, universal in their power and dynamic. Again, I like that breathing in, breathing out quality.
Yes. And just like we need all of our own individual shadow in order to be a whole integrated person in this world, we also need all of our masculine and all of our feminine inside of us to be full and integrated human beings in this world. And so often I see, and we'll get into this more as we talk about the shadow in relating, but I often see particularly women who are just beginning their work with the divine femme, there's this really big, angry rejection of the masculine and condemning of the masculine, because what that woman is actually relating to is not the divine masculine. What she's actually relating to is some very toxic parts of the collective masculine shadow. And so to fully be in our feminine, we need to be in relationship with the integrated masculine and vice versa. To be in your masculine as a man, I truly believe that there needs to also be an integrated relationship with your internal feminine and then with the external feminine as well.
Yeah. Jessica,
yes.
I was going to ask you right here along this. You've used this word before, and I want to like narrow it down. You said internalized misogyny. Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you, would you mind just kind of expanding on that and maybe even sharing your own sense of being wounded in that way?
Absolutely.
Like how that wound took effect?
Yeah. So much of what I observe happening within the sister wound, particularly right now, and what I mean by the sister wound is the wounding that women do against each other. And it can span generations and past lives, and it can be very much things that have happened in this lifetime, from little girls bullying you on the playground to being, your best friend sleeping with your boyfriend to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We've all had our experience with the sister wound. So that's what I'm referring to when I say that concept. What I've observed is that much of what we're doing to each other in the sister wound is, in my belief, reactionary to our own internalized misogyny. And so we've grown up and we live and exist in a culture that is still pretty damn misogynist. And yes, women have made strides and we're as equal as we've ever been. And there's lots of beautiful uprising of the feminine happening. And yet, I don't think that we've overcome misogyny as a whole. And so we can't expect to grow up in a culture and not absorb some of the ideology. And so growing up as a woman in a misogynist culture, I mean, I know personally, I inherited beliefs that women were not to be trusted. And I inherited that it was okay to judge other women's bodies. And I inherited all the beliefs of slut shaming and of purity and of, like all of these misogynist ideas that we get inundated with. And then we take that internalized misogyny because it's not healed within ourselves, and we project that all over our sisters. And it becomes this deep sister wound. And so the more that we can unravel and heal our internal misogyny and recognize it as that, the more clean and clear we get to be with our sisters. And that's a big part of the work that I do in this world right now, is restoring trust between women.
Wow. It's really beautiful.
Yeah. And Rainier, bringing these two concepts together of the masculine and the feminine and the shadow and the relationship between the two, how would you distill that down and share that integration?
Well, I think that the wounds like what you're talking about, the wounds that we pick up very, very early on in this ego development, where we learn these ideas about who we should be and who we shouldn't be, and what I can express elegantly and what I'm not safe to express. All of it creates a certain kind of what I call thrownness, where we throw a shadow across, like a blanket, across that which we can't accept about ourselves or can't express. And so we kind of cover these aspects that are deeply wounded in us. These become hidden aspects, just like what you're talking about, where it's like, oh, I've been told that being a woman means this, and boy, I want to divorce myself away from that, and I want to shame in others that same thing that I can't accept about myself also. And so we suppress and we repress these parts of ourselves, these fragments of our inner masculine or inner feminine. And without both parts online, both parts functional in us, it becomes incredibly difficult to respond to the situations of life. And so when you talk about this inner wound of the sister wound, it instantly brings up for me like my own father wounding, right? This idea of what I learned about men very early on. And I say men because they were the progenitors of what I associated masculinity to be. You know, what I learned about masculinity was men lied, men hid shit, men hurt people, men made promises they didn't keep, and I didn't want to be one. Yeah, I was raised by very strong femmes, right? Like very strong women in the world who needed me to be the kind of man that they had never interacted with, which for them meant me being divorced from my own inner masculine. So I was actually raised in such a way where anything that was assertive, or anything that was active, or anything that even looked aggressive was absolutely unacceptable. And so to be in the world, I actually had to connect to my feminine far more than I could connect to my masculine. It was unacceptable for me to connect to my masculine. Now, I just want to geek out on a little theory here, because this is like what I do all day, and it just makes me very passionate. But when you are divorced from the opposite side, when that balance is disrupted, and in the case I'm talking about here, when the shadow is cast, so my masculine is just covered, let's just say as a child, I push it away from myself. What happens then is that I develop a wounding around it, and I over or under emphasize it. So I talk often in my work with men about the principle of the vampire and the principle of the werewolf. You know, a man who can't effectively connect to his inner masculine, who has an immature inner masculine, will either vampirically rely on the feminine, meaning he will be overly passive, overly receptive, overly nurturant of the feminine. Like she's not only his gal pal, but she's also his mother, she's his counselor, she's his confidant, she's his director, she's his manager, right? And he's always draining her of her resources, right? He's overly dependent. The vampiric masculine, or the werewolf masculine, where it's like, in order to be a masculine entity, I've got to dominate and control and devour. I lose my mind. And that's actually often what we call the toxic masculine, which is so interesting because it's actually a divorcing from the real mature masculine. It's an overemphasis because it actually hasn't learned to be a mature masculine. So these are the ways that it showed up. And it certainly showed up in my life, right? That wounding where oh my gosh, it's like there's a mother hunger. There's like this hunger for the mother to rely on. And so I become that overly needy, clingy vampire. And then noticing it, oh my God, that's not acceptable. So I start to try and dominate and control. So these are the two aspects I've seen that play out.
Yes. And what's coming up for me right now, that is so fucking fascinating and tricky, is that just in the way that we described in the beginning of this call, that when we're relating to one another from our unintegrated shadow, there's so much room for miscommunication and conflict, and we're really missing each other. The same thing goes for the collective. And when we're relating to the masculine shadow and the masculine is relating to the feminine shadow, I mean, it's no wonder we're totally missing each other here. You know?
Yeah.
Like, it's no wonder that it is almost like a commonly accepted trope at this point that, you know, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and we just fucking miss each other because there's so much unintegrated shadow and trauma playing off of each other.
Let me ask you, Jessica, around that. How have you seen that wounding play out as far as that kind of dominance and avoidance game that I just described that I experienced in the masculine? How have you seen that either like for yourself in the feminine or just in the collective in general?
Yeah. What I'm seeing right now, it seems to be this phenomena, and it might just be because I work with women who are really doing the work and who are really like stepping into their power. This phenomena that I see is these women that are so in their power that it almost becomes masculine, and then they're wondering why their male counterparts aren't catching up and doing the work with them. And there's almost this process of emasculation that's happening, where we're not inviting our male counterparts to be in their power, which looks different from us being in our power. A man in his integrated masculine looks different from a woman, from a female identifying person in her integrated power. And so by expecting our male counterparts to meet us exactly where we're at, we're actually taking away the opportunity for the beautiful fucking alchemy that comes when the integrated masculine and integrated feminine are together, and the man is holding and the woman is the one connected with spirit and bringing it down into the earth, and that beautiful fucking dance that can happen. And so to not go off on a full tangent, to bring it back, like what I'm really seeing is women almost being more in their masculine and putting their partners almost into the toxic feminine.
Yeah. Right. Like there's this overabundant, we'll call it the rigid feminine, right? That actually looks very masculine. It needs to be in control. And again, going back to my mother wounding, my mother needed to be in control, because to not be in control looked like the abusive stepfather that she had, looked like the neglectful husband that she had, looked like the angry brothers that she had, right? She needed to dominate, and she needed a little boy who was soft and tender, who would never be a threat. And boy, we really create the relationship to nurture ourselves out of our own wounding, but we don't really think about how it could impact and wound others, you know?
Yeah.
Oof, this is heavy.
It's some heavy shit. And I think that it is the natural next evolution of, you know, women going off and doing their women's work and men going off and doing their men's work. And then the natural next step is for us to learn how to integrate and to relate to one another, because it doesn't matter. Women can do all the healing work that they want to elevate. If the masculine isn't coming with us and we're not accepting them and bringing them with us, it doesn't matter, and vice versa. And so, yes, it's heavy and it's a necessary next step in this type of work and evolution.
That's it. And I'm looking at our clock, Jessica, and I'm thinking, oh my God, like we are distilling the mysteries of the universe down into 52 minutes and counting. And we have committed to like an hour-ish of time. Now, I've just reminded everyone to send in questions as they've got them. But
Yeah.
Where do we want to go from here? How do we want to navigate this timepiece that we've got in front of us?
Yeah, I would love to answer some questions, anything that's coming up for you guys as we talk about this, anything that doesn't feel clear, or to even hear from somebody if someone feels like sharing words about the impact of what we've shared thus far, if anyone's open to that. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, it looks like we can take even just the first question that's kind of coming up right now. Like, can we talk about how the wounded masculine can show up a little more? Yeah, well, and Jessica, I'll let you answer from your own experience. I can certainly answer from my own experience, and I can own my own wounded masculine like nobody's business. My own wounded masculine really looks like those two ways I split out. The vampiric masculine, as I often talk about it, or the werewolf. Yeah. And so these two concepts, one has a kind of insatiable neediness to it, right? Like, oh, I need to feel connected. I need to feel some softness. I need to feel like reassured that my own ego structure is so underdeveloped, so uncentered, so open that actually I need someone to tell me what to do next. And I need someone to be very soft. I need a comforting mother figure. And so I use all of my feminine identified friends, whether male or female, to kind of fill this void that I don't have access to internally, because I can't access that strong inner masculine that reminds me of who I am in that moment. I then begin to look to everyone else and I become like a bottomless pit. Like, right? Like no amount of reassurance is enough in that moment. That's how I've seen it play out.
That's so interesting to hear from a masculine perspective what that felt experience is. Because from a feminine perspective, the way that I've witnessed the wounded masculine come up is through abandonment, is through violence, is through control, is through objectification.
And Jessica, to that point, that's that other side, that werewolf image, right? That because I don't have a grounded sense of self in relationship to the disconnected feminine, right? Then my next step is to gobble up and consume and tear into anything that might actually satiate me. It's like if you've ever fed like a wild dog that is very starving and hungry, it will like devour you in the process of trying to devour the food. That's sort of what it's like. It becomes, again, insatiable, but in the opposite way, where it's devouring now everything violently. And in an attempt not to be controlled by the feminine in its mind, it controls, it dominates, it becomes violent and toxic.
I want to also just address Erin's question, how does one even begin? What I would say is, first, just knowing your shadow, which I know you, and I know that you are already doing that work. And then the other piece that I would offer up to everybody would be, when you're relating with someone, do your best to be discerning about whether you're actually relating to that human being, or if you're relating to your own projection of what the masculine or the feminine shadow looks like, and the wounding that that masculine or feminine shadow may have inflicted upon you. So are you actually looking at this human being, or are you looking at your story of what the masculine or the feminine shadow has been in your life?
Yeah. I would also say a really good thing that I use a lot in relationship to developing the side that has been left in the shadows, the underdeveloped side of yourself, whether it's masculine or feminine. And this does require a little bit of awareness, right? Like, you kind of have to know if it's a more underdeveloped relationship with the masculine that you have, or a little more underdeveloped relationship with the feminine. But is that you allow for the cultivation of a new character inside of yourself. So this might be finding someone who you can begin to correspond with. It could be a famous person or a mythological person, or someone you know, like an acquaintance. And this is weird here, I'm going to acknowledge its weirdness. I'm going to judge it a little as weird, but it's to allow that person, that concept of that person, to possess you. To, like, say for like a day, I'm going to allow myself to be their skin suit. They're going to walk around in me, and I'm going to respond from their instincts, and I'm going to respond from their characteristics. And this is because that aspect of yourself has been so cut away that you don't even know what it feels like to embody that. So this is giving you the opportunity to try that on. Yeah. And as you do, you can begin to correspond to that more and
Yeah. And so I'm really curious, just in these last few moments, before I share a little bit about what's next in this line of work with Rainier and I, and what we're coming up with and offering. If one or two people are open to sharing just what's coming up for you right now around what we're talking about. Are you having any new insights? What is it bringing up inside of you? Because there's a lot here. And I'm also like super intrigued to hear how it's landing for Dakota and her male counterpart that's there. Like, you guys are here doing this work together, clearly, which is so fucking beautiful. And so I'm just curious to hear for you guys, what is this bringing up? Anyone can go.
Actually, this is Morgan and I'm Dakota.
We both have these like gender neutral kind of names, like who's Morgan and who's Dakota.
I love it. Perfect for the conversation.
I'm just really grateful for this call and for both of you holding this space. Shadow work is a big piece that I know I've been doing independently for a while, and then coming together with Dakota, it's something that we both value. I'm in an interesting spot for me with my feminine and my feminine shadow. I come from this place of very strong, powerful women, very independent women, single mother. I worked through a lot of like man-hating in my like teenage years and early 20s. And I finally came to this place where I actually had so much love for men and the wounding that was there, and I could see it, and that healed the wounding that I had in myself. And I'm in this place now where life is putting me into my feminine in these ways that are extremely uncomfortable for me. So I'm needing to reframe vulnerability and devotion. And I don't like the word dependence, but there's something there that I'm trying to find in that as well. So I feel like I'm in a little bit of a different place than some other women may be in their spectrum of working with their masculine and feminine dynamic. But boy, is it uncomfortable. All of it's uncomfortable, but this is very, very uncomfortable because for me, I believe in past lives, and I shoved all of this stuff down from past lives, and now it's coming back, and I'm having to feel it and live in it and be in it in a way where it's like, look, what's the good in this? How can you be fed in this? Like, where is this actually beautiful? So
Morgan, can I just say, you hit upon something right there that I think is so crucial to shadow work, that I just want to like broadcast out very loudly. You used the word uncomfortable.
mm-hmm.
And as much as I've done shadow work, and I think Jessica probably has done it as well, this is a word that will keep coming up as to the true nature. If you're doing shadow work and you're really digging into these aspects that are so core to yourself, and even past lives like you're talking about, it is going to yield like the feeling of nails on a chalkboard or like grinding across gravel. That's how it can often feel. Doesn't have to, but boy, many of us have felt that same way. So I just want to thank you for saying that word.
Yeah.
I cut you off, Dakota.
Oh, no worries. Morgan had more to say, or was the one had stuff to say. But coming from similar childhood, extremely strong, independent grandmother, single mother, and my mom went off to the Navy, and I went from strong, independent grandma, then flip-flopped to dad, and dad had wartime PTS, and going from that, when you hit upon the controlling and the soft little boy that wasn't going to put up a fight or problem, definitely resonate with that. And going from that aspect, that spectrum, and flip-flopping all the way to this other over dominating kind of emasculation of masculine energy, and kind of finding that that piece there. It's been difficult because where I see Morgan is she has very strong masculine, and she could fucking take the household and get everything going. And where I very much been in my little boy playful feminine energy, and seeing how, I guess, like going into a rites of passage work, and I've seen it in friends of mine too, where that at some point it's hard for men to kind of grow up because they still want to be the playful little boy. And when I'm out of balance, Morgan feels it, and whatever masculine energy that I'm not showing and I'm not following within myself that I'm shoving down, it gets redirected to her, and it comes at me from this way, and it makes it a lot more difficult for me because then I have to hear it from someone else instead of just following my own inner GPS. And I feel like that for men, there's a lot of that feminine want to play, doesn't want to grow up, Peter Pan energy. And for a strong independent woman to be able to finally like be okay in her feminine, myself, I know, I'll talk to myself, I've had to grow up. I've had to find the balance of like, I can handle this. I can go through, I can run my life. I can take hold of the reins of the household, but also find that balance of like play for me and like play with Morgan, and how that all kind of balances out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm just feeling so incredibly like touched in this moment to have the privilege of witnessing you guys in such vulnerability, and and just seeing two humans in relationship who are clearly doing the work with one another. What a beautiful gift and what a beautiful example for all of us. So thank you for being willing to share.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. So on that note, I would love to share about what's coming up next for Rainier and I. What do you think, friend?
I think it sounds good.
Okay. So we have created a 4-part series course that is going to happen in August. And we are going to have 4 modules, and these are very basic, but just so you can get the idea of like what this course is going to be covering. Week 1 is going to be conscious relating. So setting up a strong foundation of non-judgment, active listening, validation, and self-respect, creating a holding space where we can learn and understand and authentically become more ourselves. And all of these modules will be teaching and then also experiential. So we'll also be doing didactic work, which I think is going to be really juicy and cool. And you can come in as a single person or with a partner. That's also great. Week 2 will be exploring the feminine, so the principles of the feminine, the energetics, the archetypes, exploring the healthy feminine, the shadow of the feminine, identifying our own beliefs about the feminine within ourselves and externally. And Rainier and I will share experiences around our own journey with the feminine and exploring how we relate to the feminine, both in health and then also in the shadow. And then week 3, we'll be doing the same thing around the masculine. And then week 4 is going to be the shadow and relating in the shadow. And my hope for that piece of the module is that we all kind of get clear on how we can start to relate to one another from a place of integrated shadow. Instead of bouncing off of one another's shit, how can we authentically relate to one another as integrated, whole human beings and have the connections and relationships that we crave and we desire and we deserve and that we're capable of? Rainier, do you want to add to any of that?
Well, I think that something kind of cool is that the folks who are on this call are going to get to be the first ones to dive into that because it's super limited space. We can't let the whole world in. So it's just going to be for 20 people. And so the people on this call have the first bids to that. So that's going to be really exciting. So as soon as that comes out, and I think we're going to send out that email in the next couple of weeks, jump on it. Don't hesitate because I think it's going to fill up pretty damn quick.
Yeah. And we're going to be giving everybody on this call not only early bird access, so you'll have access to register for this course 1 week before everybody else, but we're also going to give you 10% off as a thank you for being here on this call and for answering the call and stepping the fuck up, because this work heals not only yourself, but then it also goes on to heal those that you enter into relationship with. And I mean, man, relationship is in many ways the meaning of life. And so if there's anything to do work on, in my opinion, it's conscious relating.
Jessica, did you feel like Oprah right then? Like, and you get a humpback whale, and you get a humpback whale. I mean, like, I kind of felt like that vibe for a second. I loved it so much.
I am aspiring to be Oprah, so thank you for seeing me there.
I'm really excited about this too because, as I think we talked about in this, at least in my life, the shadow has touched on more than any other area relationship. And I feel like in the great body of literature around the shadow, most of it is squarely aimed at the individual. And so what I'm so excited about with what we're talking about is this relating in the shadows and this beautiful divine dance between the masculine and the feminine that happens from that place, not in spite of that place, but literally from that place of relating in the shadows. I couldn't be more excited about that.
Yeah. And there will be a replay of this call available in the next few days on both of our websites. So if you know and love anybody that you think would benefit from this work, we invite you to share that replay, invite them to join you on this journey. The more people that we can call into health, the better. Rainier, what do you think? Is there any work or reading to prepare?
Say that one more time. I actually didn't hear what you said.
Yeah, there's a question from Erin that says, is there any work or reading we could do to prepare for this workshop, or just come as we are?
Well, honestly, probably the thing that I'm most excited about with this workshop is the getting out of our heads and getting into the relating aspect. So I could assign you like 10 books, but the thing is, it's going to almost all go out the window to some extent, just as it always does when we get in front of another human being and use them as the backboard of our own projections, our own shadows, and suddenly, oh my God, it's a whole new world, right? Yeah. So prepare as you wish and come as you are.
And Erin, you're pretty damn prepared, friend. Erin does the fucking work. So I have no doubt that you will have everything that you need inside of you. All of you have everything that you need inside of you. Just a willingness. Yeah. I think a willingness is the biggest piece.
Deep sigh.
Yeah, let's all take a deep breath together. In through the nose. I just want to thank you all for taking your time this afternoon to be here with us. And I just want to say I'm always available as a resource. You can find me on Instagram at Jessica J. Muir. If you have any questions, anything that comes up, if you're interested in some deeper women's work specifically, I am here. No question is too small. This is what I live and breathe. So please find me if there's anything that you would like support in.
Yeah, very much the same. Rainier Wylde on Instagram or rainierwylde.com. Jesse, you had asked if it was okay to reach out about a specific issue. Absolutely, that or anything else, and to any one of you, I would just offer that same thing. Yeah.
And Rainier, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you all in August, huh?
Woo-woo! It's going to be good. All right,
all right.
Until then, we love you guys.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you.